create this chart in R. This chart is from this article in the New York Times. First of all, looking at this chart, let's talk about our strategy of how we'll build it using R. So this is, at its core, a bar chart. So I know we'll be using geom column. And there's some interesting things happening over here. First, we have these bars where a portion of it is filled with white, or I guess it's a little transparent. But this white portion on top and then lower is the normal portion. So these are like stacked bar charts. A couple different ways I think we could go about trying to plot that. We could incorporate it in the data in such a way that we could stack the bars or the columns, or we could create this data as its own separate data frame that we then bring into a separate geom column and have those show up. And I'm actually inclined to do that second method because, well, we can't stack them actually, because stacking them would create, we would have to adjust the numbers so that the height was correct. This column is obviously colored separately, so we can easily handle that within our fill aesthetic. We can say if the X label is this value, this July value, then we fill it orange, else we're going to fill it this gray color. We also have these text annotations, and these are true annotations. They are not showing data points per se. I guess you could argue that this is showing a data point, but it really is more than that. So I will use a few different annotate calls to put this text, and this text in. And we will use a different annotation to put this line in and this curve. And then the other tricky thing is just going to be updating the formatting of this chart so that we have the x-axis showing up as it does here. We have these y-axis labels. This might be an instance where I actually just drop the labels altogether and recreate these using geom text. And then the panel grid. And that's about it. So there's going to be several elements here, but it's totally doable in R. So let's get cracking. So back in my project, I'm in Positron here. This is the repository where I'm holding all the code for these tutorial videos I'm making. So I actually want to change my working directory so that I'm within this specific project or this specific folder. So I'm going to do that right now. All right, there we go. And you can see I have this data folder here. And within the data folder, I've already pulled in the jobs data. So let's go ahead and get cracking. You can see that the jobs data is an Excel file. So we're going to need a special package to be able to read that data in. That was the way that the data was put out from the government website I downloaded it from. I could have saved it as a CSV. That might have made it easier, but I figured we could go ahead and show how to read in Excel files too. And we can do that with read Excel, the read Excel package. So let's go ahead and say jobs equals read Excel SX, because that's the file type. And then we'll say data/July jobs.xlsx. Read it in, and let's see what that does for us. And this looks really weird. This is not what we want. So sometimes when you have these automated Excel files put out by some data service, it'll have this, I guess this would be data about the data file itself. We want to skip all of these rows essentially. And within the read Excel suite of functions, there is a skip. And we will skip 11 rows in there. Now that looks how we want it. So let's hop back over here and see what the span of our data actually is. And we can see it starts with July 24. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take this format of the data and we're going to pivot it to be long format first of all. And that'll make it much easier for us to filter on the data. And it'll make handling it in ggplot a lot easier too. So let's just call it long jobs. Well, actually, I like to just work with it first. So let's say jobs, pivot longer. The columns, we'll just say -1, which means everything but the first column. And let's say names to month, values to jobs. Oh, we're going to be using the tidyverse. So let's go ahead and load that. All right, and there we can see this is putting our data out in long format that we want. But filtering here is going to be a little tricky, because if we want to filter everything from 2024, July 2024 and on, then we could filter for the year is greater than or equal to 2024, but then we can't say in the month is either July or later. So we need to create a new variable here that is something we can filter on. So we'll say mutate, and let's call this year month equals year month. And I'm going to add the glue package also, because I like using glue, and I suspect I'll want to use it in ggplot, building the plot as well. So we'll say year month. Oh, year month is from the lubridate package, so we need to load that too. Okay, so now we'll say year month equals, and then we'll take the year and we'll take the value that's the month. Oh, glue, I need to actually use the glue call. If I look back up here, oh, year is capitalized. There we go. So that's creating now a date column, which is something we can filter for. So now we can say filter for everything. Filter year month is greater than, equal to, actually equal to, greater than, I think is how I need to put it. Year month day 2024-07-01. What am I missing? Okay, I was right the first time. So there we have it filtered. But because of the original format of the data, when it was in wide format, we had these cells missing data. So let's also say, and jobs not is in a jobs. All right, so that's what we want our data to look like. So now that I have it where I want it, I'll assign it to long jobs. Okay, let's get charting. So we'll say long jobs, ggplot. In our aesthetic, we want the dates on the x-axis, and we want the jobs on the y-axis. So that'd be year, month, and jobs. So that's looking pretty much how we want it to look. We can see we're missing this data here, the actual revision. So we'll have to add that in, but this is a good start for us. So let's go ahead and get this formatted a little better. Something that's jumping out at me right away is that these bars are pretty close together. They're closer together than these. And that's because if we look at our data, everything is showing up as technically the first of the month. That means the x-axis is essentially showing days. And for this would be, so January, February has, fewer days. So the gap here is smaller because there are only 28 days. So I want to change this so that that's not appearing. And I think we can make our lives a little easier too. Instead of making it a date x-axis, which can be a little tricky to deal with, let's make it a numerical. And we can do that by adding another row. Let's call it xend, xindex, or another variable, sorry. And we'll just put the row number there, and that will serve as our index. And then we can say xend. And now it's showing up correctly. The spacing is very even. Obviously, we want these labels on the x-axis to be different, but these are kind of custom labels to begin with, so I think we were going to have to hard code those in anyway. Next, let's start playing with the theme to get it where we want it. Have I saved this? No, I haven't saved this file yet. So I call all of these make the chart when I'm making one of these videos. So theme, we want to do a few things. This is pretty much a blank background. So let's say panel background is element blank. Let's say I'm just going to get rid of the axis text on the left, and I'm going to assume I will use geom text to put these labels in. Okay, axis text y element blank, axis ticks y. No, actually, we want to get rid of all the ticks. Death to ticks. All right. And then let's say axis line x equals element line. So that gives us that line that will be here. But obviously, ggplot does this. It expands the scales. So we can fix that by saying scale y continuous expand equals, I think that does it. Yeah. I feel like this line is a little thick too. So I'm going to say line width equals 1. Nope. 0.5. 0.25. Okay, that's better. We want to get rid of the x and y labels because we don't have a label here or here. All right, so we're making some progress here. Let's update the colors too. Now, one trick that you can often use is if you inspect the page, you can select the element and see what the color is. But here, everything but the text is actually a single image. So we're not able to do that. But in these cases, I have this extension ColorZilla where you can pick a color from the page. I'm pretty sure there are lots of utilities that would let you do this. But you click and that just copies the color. And so I'm going to assign this variable or assign this to a variable. I'm going to call it this gray. And I'm assigning it to a variable in case I end up needing it in a lot of different places. I don't want to have to copy that. And I might, if I end up needing to change that, that would be a real hassle. Anyway, so fill equals this gray. All right, there we go. Now, this naming, calling it this gray, is something I picked up from JavaScript, actually. I really like how you end up using that this nomenclature to refer to a specific iteration of something. And so I use that a lot now. I'll call it like this data or this color or, you know, what have you. It's pretty handy. And it takes something off of your mental load trying to come up with names. I know it sounds silly, but it really is. Like, it can add up when you're trying to come up with names over and over again. All right, so we have long jobs, yada, yada, yada. Next, let's tackle this. Actually, I just changed the fill here, so let's go ahead and change this fill too. Let's try to be a little focused. My psychologist fiance told me she has questioned whether she thought I had a mild case of ADHD because I tend to hop around quite a bit. But she decided I didn't. I think of that whenever I'm, doing something like this and I do one color and then I'm off to something else and I'm like, oh, why didn't I just do all the colors all at once. Anyway, that was a digression. Okay. Whoops, I don't want to do that. Okay, this gray can still be like that, and then this orange will be like that. And now, let's say, within geom column, we'll say fill equals if else. And if the x variable, which is x end, equals, so this is 10, 11, 12, 13, we'll call it this orange. If that's not the case, it'll be this gray. This old thing. So what's happening here is ggplot is identifying these values as categories instead of the actual colors themselves. And we can fix that by saying scale fill identity, which will tell it to take the actual identity, the value of that. All right, there we go. Looking pretty good. Now let's do the x-axis. Scale x continuous. So just already with my thinking around how I'm going to build this whole plot with the multiple annotation layers, multiple geoms, this ggplot call is going to get really long. So I am going to try to pull some things out of it. So here, let's create the x-axis labels as its own variable. And so we want July 24, September, November. Okay, so we have all our labels there. Scale x continuous labels equals, oops, x labels. Oh, I need to set the breaks too. This can just be a sequence because it's every other one. Yeah, it's every other one starting with the first one. So that's how we want that to look. Now let's get the y-axis. And like I said, I want to put the y labels as a geom. And so I'll need a data frame to pass into that geom. So I'll go ahead and create another data frame up here. And these will be y labels. So this will be a tibble. And let's say y equals, so we want it to be at 100, 200, 300. And if we look back at our data, it's showing the values in thousands. So I actually want it to be hundreds when I'm creating the labels so that it shows up properly on the scale of the chart. So y equals C1 to 3 times 1 E3. If we look at y labels, there we go, 100, 200, 300. Now we don't want it to just be 100, 200, 300 though. I guess I could just say 100. It's exactly the same amount of characters. That's funny. Or it wasn't funny. But hey, when you're a nerd, different things make you laugh. Okay, so we want to format this a little differently. So I'm going to mutate this. And let's create a new variable and call it the lab for label. And I'm going to use the scales library, the scales package, because I'm going to use label, comma. And we will have y be the variable. And the scale we want is 1E3, I think. I have to actually load the package first. Okay, and down here we can see that variable is created, and it looks pretty close to what we want. But we also need a prefix. Okay, now that's how it shows up here. So that's what we want. So once we have the data frame, we can add the text geom. So data equals y labels. Aesthetic label equals lab. Yeah, lab here. Oh, and we want x to be 0, y equals y. And let's just see what that looks like. Okay, that looks pretty good. It kind of looks like this is a minus, but that's actually happening because the chart is clipping the text that is falling outside of the panel area. So we could do a couple things. First, I want hjust equals 0. There, I think that takes care of it for the most part. We actually want these to be a little left, though, of where they are here. So I'm actually going to change the x to be -0.5. I think that'll look good. Yeah, that's pretty close. Now we want the color to be a little lighter. Okay, so let's say color equals gray 40. And I think it needs to be a little smaller too. So let's say size equals, I always forget the scale of size. Okay, so that made it bigger. Okay, that looks pretty close to this. Oh, you know what? I haven't added in the panel grid that we need. So that would be panel grid y, major y. We'll call it element line, color equals gray 70. It's pretty light if we look back. Yeah, it's pretty light. Line type equals 3. That will give us the dotted line. Yeah, there we go. And these dots are kind of spaced widely, so let's say size equals 0.2. Maybe a little bigger than that. All right, that looks pretty good. Now let's hop back up to our geom text call here. And when it starts getting really long, when the ggplot chain is kind of long, I start adding some spacing here to help visually separate the different elements. Okay, so geom text, what was I doing? Oh, we need to move these up. So let's say y, we can do it like this, +5. Okay. That looks pretty good. The text looks a little small actually, so I'm going to go back on what I did here and say 4. All right, that looks better. Why do we have so much space over here? Let's say expand equals C. Does it expand? So it goes a little bit over, but not much. So I'm going to say, now that looks more like what we want. Oh, but the right should be going over more. All right, something like that. Maybe 0.25. All right, that looks pretty good. So now we have those labels, we have the x-axis, we have the bars. Now we need to add these two bars. I have already looked up what the value of those bars needs to be. So what we need to do is create another data frame, and we'll call these first values. How about that? Create a tibble again, and we'll say, so x is going to be, it's going to be these two. So we have 13 bars here, so it's going to be 11 and 12. And y will be, these are the values I already looked up. Okay, so now let's add another geom column here. And we do want this column to come first because I guess it doesn't necessarily matter because these outlines are the same as this color, but I want these bars to show up beneath the other bars. So we'll say data equals, what did I just call this? First values. Aesthetic x equals x, y equals y. All right, and there we have those bars. And if we just visually check, we can see that that's pretty much what they should look like. Now, if we zoom in here, we can see that the dotted line is there, so it's showing up a little bit. So I'm not going to copy this exactly how they have it here, because I would prefer that these bars are transparent. Where's my geom column? Here. So we'll say fill is none, or we can say NA. So now they're gone, but we want the color. If we set the color argument, it will create the outline. And it's going to be this gray. It's going to be that same color. All right, there we go. So now that's showing up how I want it. It's looking like this plot. So now let's start adding the annotations. Since I was just working here, I'll go ahead and add this one, revise down. And for all these annotations, they need to come after these so that they appear on top. So annotate, and the geom will be a text geom. And the label will be revised down. And we actually want a new line there. Font face will be italic. I think this is how you set that. Oh, we need to set x equals, so this is 11, this is 12. Let's say 11.5. And y equals, we want it to appear like here-ish. So let's say, let's just say 90. That looks kind of good. But if we take a close look here, you can see that there's actually a background color that's semi-transparent. So I'm going to change this from being a text to a label geom. And I don't want an outline around it. We will say fill equals alpha white 0.75. So this will create a hex code for white where it's partially transparent. The alpha argument will be set to 0.75. Oh, and I want to get rid of that outline. So I will say, actually forget how to do that. So let's look at geom label. Geom label. Label size. All right, so now the outline's gone. And we have that background. Let's change the color to be a little lighter. So we'll make it a gray. Maybe like a gray 40. All right, that's good. And then let's change the line height to 1. Yeah, so now there's not as much space between the two lines. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so we have that annotation. Now let's add this annotation with this line going down. So first we can do the line, and we want the line to come. I'm basically just going to point it down behind this bar so that I don't have to worry about exactly where it ends, because you can see here it goes all the way to the column. So let's just annotate geom equals segment, x equals 13. So that means it's going to be over here. X end. So anytime you are working with segments, you have to give it x and x end. Same for y. So it's all going to be at 13 on the x-axis. Y will be, let's start it at, I don't know, 50. Y end will be like 250 or something. Okay, so we got that. That looks how we want it. Now let's hop down here and add another annotate. I would prefer to keep my annotate calls down here unless there's a reason like I just had for that one because I want it to appear behind. Otherwise, I put my annotate calls by each other. Okay, so annotate, and this is going to be text x equals. So this is right aligned. It's really aligned here at the edge of the bar. So that would be like 13.5-ish. And y equals like 275. And the label will be 73,000 jobs in July. Oh, and I need a line break. And then plus. Oh, I didn't align it. All right, that looks pretty good. We just want the line height again. Cool. And this actually is black text, so we will just leave it like that. Now let's add this one. So this one is showing up. This is left aligned. We can see there is also this white background on it. You can tell where the panel grid here isn't showing up. So this is going to be a label, not just text. So we will say annotate, and then geom equals label, line size equals 0, x equals, what did I say? So 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, like 9.5, y equals 180, label equals growth in May, and new line, June was lower than new line initially estimated. And then let's say line height again, line height equals 1. I forgot a couple things. H just equals 0. Oh, label size. Whoa, that's way too far over. Okay, so we actually need to move that over to like 7.5. Okay, that's pretty good. We want it to be higher though, don't we? So we should set it just at 200. And then we need this little curve here. So this is another annotation we'll add. And this geom will be a curve. Okay, and just like with segment, we need to give it x, x end, y, y end. So we want it to start like right here. So let's say this 13, 12, 11. So if it starts right here, that'd be like 10.75 maybe. X end. And then it'll go to here to 11.5. And y will be like 190. And it will go to, what, 170? Okay, that's kind of close, but the angle is different. And I forget what that argument is. So let's look at geom curve to see how they do this, because there's an angle argument and, oh, it's curvature. That's right. If we scroll down and look at the help, a numeric value giving the amount of curvature, negative values produce left-hand curves. So we want to give it curvature equals negative 0.5. See what that does. All right, now it's curved the right way, but it's not exactly where we want it. So let's move it down. So let's say 10.5 and 11. Oops, not X. Let's say 180 to 160. Okay, that looks pretty good, but I think this can just be 11. And this needs to be a little bit less. That looks pretty close. I'm going to go back to 10 point. And back and forth on this. Back and forth. Okay, that looks close enough. You can spend so much time trying to dial in these like the curvature here. But that looks pretty good. So last thing we need to add is a title and the caption. So let's go ahead and say title equals monthly change in jobs. Caption equals, and let's just copy this. Okay. One thing that's not coming through here are these little dots here. I think that must be done with like the styling of the web page. So I've actually figured out there's a Unicode character that mimics this. It won't be exactly what is showing up there, but this 2219. And there, we're getting a little dot. But if we look closely, these are showing up as a different color than the text itself. So I'm going to want to use a little HTML here. And to do that in the text, we're going to need the GG text package. And we will want plot caption to be an element text box simple. And let's say color equals gray 30. Okay, I think that color is pretty good here. And since this is pretty long and it's going to get longer, I'm going to use glue again. Okay, and here I just want to put a span tag. Nope, not like that. Like that. And within the span tag, we'll update the styling and say style equals color gray, like 70. Did that work? Let's add a space. All right, and there we're getting our little dot. So, it's not perfect, but, it's pretty close. So let's add it again here. And now that's looking pretty close to what this caption is. Finally, we need to adjust the font that we're using. I forgot about that. And as I've said in my other videos, I've already done some digging to find a font that is similar to what the New York Times uses, and that is Libre Franklin. You can go on Google Fonts and download Libre Franklin yourself. So I'm not going to show you that here, but element text. So that just updated these labels, the caption, and the title, but it did not update any of this because these are added by text geomes or label geomes. And when you set the theme text, it doesn't automatically play with the data text because it wants you to set the data intentionally. So a trick I only just learned, instead of going into this annotate call and this call and this call and setting the family for all of them, which can be a bit of a hassle, we can do it in one shot, or technically two, I guess, because you can use update geom defaults and then say for every text geom, I want you to make the family Lieber Franklin. And then we run the plot again. And now it updated this and this. But this one didn't change, nor did this one. And that is because these were created with label geomes. So we need to do, the same thing with the label. Update geome defaults for the label geome. Did that just do it? Did I run it? Okay, I'm not sure what's happening. So update geome defaults, label. Okay, when this happens, I will just try to restart R. So I just restarted. Oh, I gotta set my working directory again. Okay, and now that is what we want the text to look like. There we have it. I think this looks exactly how we want it to look. We've achieved all the elements of this plot, including this interesting stacking, or actually not stacking of the columns here, but calling out a revision that was made in the jobs report and highlighting the most recent numbers. So all in all, a pretty cool exercise. Hope you enjoyed.